May be seated as we turn to the word of the Lord for us this evening. A couple of lessons that I'd like to focus on, really. The first one, the gospel reading for this coming Sunday, is recorded for us in Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through 33. And we hear these words. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat by this time was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." In this passage, we hear about the mighty power of Jesus over the forces of nature itself. And in truth, that's really just a small fraction of his power. His power is so much more than just controlling wind and waves. The greatest power is the power to forgive the sinful heart and to give us faith in him when we are, like Peter, people of little faith. We like to focus on what he isn't doing instead of what he is doing. And we worry and fret about the things that are out of our control. He says, "Trust in me." You know, another partner passage that goes with this one is the Old Testament reading for this Sunday. And it comes to us from Job 38. Another place where the Lord speaks to us as we get too worried about the things of this world and start to think that we need to control them and that we have to be in charge. Job 38, verses 4 through 18 is the passage. And it's one where Job has been complaining to God. Why is everything bad? Why has it all gone wrong? He's been putting up with it for a long time. This is chapter 38. So we remember all the plagues and problems that Job faced. He had a reason to be kind of unhappy. Life was pretty miserable for Job. Lost everything, and it was just all falling to pieces. And finally, after his friends tried to help him, they didn't do a very good job. They just kind of made him feel worse. Then finally he says, "Lord, why is all this happening? What is the problem? What's going on?" It wasn't a total cry of faithlessness. It was more of, "I just don't get it. I don't understand." So finally, the Lord speaks to Job to remind him of who's in charge. And here's what he says. "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Or who shut in the sea with the doors when it burst out from the womb, when I made clouds and garment and thick darkness its swaddling band, and prescribed limits for it and set bars and doors, and said, 'Thus far you shall come and no farther, and here shall your proud waves be stayed'? Have you commanded the morning since your days began, and caused the dawn to know its place, that it might take hold of the skirts of the earth, and the wicked be shaken out of it? It is changed like clay under the seal, and its features stand out like a garment. From the wicked their light is withheld, and their uplifted arm is broken. Have you entered into the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you? Or have you seen the gates of deep darkness? Have you comprehended the expanse of the earth? Declare if you know all this." This passage the Lord is reminding Job of who's really in control. Who made the whole universe? God did. Who's in control of it all? God is. Who is still working good for us all the time, like making the sun rise to give us the warmth that we need to grow crops and the rain in its appropriate time, who keeps the seas in their place. Yes, there are things that happen in this world that shake it a little bit. We see pestilence, war, drought, some of those problems that are the result of a broken creation. But God is still in control. And he's reminding Job of this fact. In fact, speaks to him kind of with sarcasm. Who determined all these things? Surely you know. You think you know everything. You've been complaining to me like you are in control. He says, tell me then. That's kind of what the Lord is doing with Peter too. Peter, you seem like you always are in control. You always know what's going on and you have an answer. Well, trust in me now. And Peter loses that focus on the Lord. He trusts in himself. He looks at the waves and he starts to sink. In all these ways, God reminds us that he is in control of our lives too. When you start to complain and worry, remember we are limited. We're not God. And he has been working all things for good since the world was created. Most of all, he gave us Jesus. And if you have Jesus, nothing else matters by comparison. We're forgiven. We're set free from the power of death and hell itself. So the pestilence and the plagues of this world, even illness itself, what does it really matter compared to what we already have? We're on our way to heaven. We're forgiven by Jesus. And so that's what the Lord's trying to remind Peter. He's trying to remind Job, I've got you. Don't worry about all this. And when we start to complain, he reminds us, my ways are not your ways, and neither are your ways my ways. He's above them all. He's got a bigger plan than we can see. His plan is to save people from hell. His plan is to get us with him for eternity. And how he works that out, it's not for us to comprehend. It's beyond us. And so we have to trust in him alone. He is the one in control of it all. And so we try to gain that perspective instead of worrying about what's out of our control. No, for Peter, I love the way they portrayed this scene from the Chosen series. If any of you have seen that, it was in a recent season here. As Peter was there after this great feeding of miraculous feeding with fish, then the disciples got in the boat and were heading out, and they were fighting the storm. They were terrified by the storm that was against them. And then Jesus shows up walking on the water, and they're even more scared. It's got to be a ghost. Can't be anything else. No one walks on water. Jesus says, don't be afraid. It's me. And at that point, the way they portray it in The Chosen is that Peter, he's been struggling with God's ways. Because in the, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen that season yet. But the way they portray it is Peter in his personal life, they kind of paint a bigger picture than what's really in the Bible. We know he is married. We know he had a mother-in-law that Jesus miraculously healed. But they portray in The Chosen that Peter was going through some other struggles in his personal life that were really making him wonder, is this Jesus really good? Because he has power to heal all these sick people, but he's not helping me and my wife with our problems. Doesn't he care? Why is he doing that? Doesn't make sense. And so he's struggling and just going through that. Maybe you felt that way at times. Maybe you can relate to Peter. You have faith in Jesus. You do. You believe he's almighty. You see him do miracles. You've seen him do wonderful things. But why isn't he helping me now with this? It just doesn't seem right. Is he happy that I'm going through this pain and sorrow? Doesn't he care? And so in this episode, Jesus comes and he specifically is talking to Peter. He says, don't worry, don't be afraid. And Peter says, if it's really you, then prove it is. Let me come to you on the water. And it's almost like a defiant cry that Peter has at first. Like, show me you really are. Show me that you really are in control and that you really have the power. I believe you, but show me you'll do it for me right here, right now. Jesus says, okay, Peter, come on. walk on the water. And so Peter, almost to kind of be defiant and almost rebellious, okay, I'll prove it whether you are or not. And he jumps out and walks on the water, and he's doing it. Maybe it kind of surprises him at first. Okay, it is working. Or maybe he's saying, yeah, you have this power, you can make me do this, but... And then Peter loses that focus for whatever reason. He starts to realize, what am I doing? What am I trying to prove? Maybe it's partly like, who am I to stand up before this God who can help me to walk on water? That could well be what was going through his head. What have I done? I've been rude to Jesus. I've defied him and argued with him. And now he's showing me again that he is in control. What am I doing? And he starts to sink because he's not trusting in Jesus as he should as his loving Savior. Jesus still has pity on Peter. He reaches out in love and pulls him back up and reminds Peter, I am in control and I still love you. I will never be angry at you even when you question me, even when you rebel against me. I'll still love you. He did it for Job. Even when Job rebelled, God chastised him and said, stop complaining, I'm in control. And then he blessed Job in the end with even more than he ever knew before. He blesses Peter by lifting him and strengthening him for the tasks ahead. And he'll do that for you too. Trust in him that when it doesn't make sense, he's not going to give up on you. You may not understand why he's doing it, but he still does love you. Even when everything's falling apart, he still cares for you. And he won't let you drown. He won't let Satan take your soul from you. That's what matters most. He won't let you fall into the depths of hell. He's going to hold you up and give you the faith you need to make it through to eternity with him. And then all those other things that you worry about, they're not so important. We may not understand how God works, but we do know this. He loves us, and he will never forsake us. Cling to that even when things are tough in your life. He loves you, and he will not forsake you. And he will keep you with him for all eternity. That's what matters most. Cling to that in the day of trial. He loves you. Amen.